In the news tonight, His Majesty and the Kenyan President discussed cooperation in a host of sectors and agreed to coordinate in the fight against terrorism. The King addresses the fight against terrorism and the impact of the Syrian refugee crisis on Jordan in a CBS interview. And aid convoys reached besieged Syrian towns for the first time in months as warplanes pound Aleppo. Good evening and welcome to the news at 10. His Majesty the King discussed with the Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta ways to cement Jordanian-Kenyan ties and regional and international developments, including the fight on terrorism. During the talks held at the Presidential Palace in Nairobi and attended by officials from two countries, King Abdullah said Jordan is keen to build closer relations with Kenya in political, economic, investment, trade, pharmaceuticals and medical tourism sectors. Jordan plans to open an embassy in Nairobi, a move which they said would upgrade the level of relations. They talked about ways to enhance trade, exports and imports between the ports of Aqaba and in Mombasa in Kenya. His Majesty spoke about the privileges Jordan's economy offers for business, besides the kingdom's strategic relocation as a link between the Middle East and Africa. The two sides agreed to sign several trade agreements ahead of the Jordanian-Kenyan Week, which will be held in Kenya in December. The Jordanian-Kenyan Week is seen as a key window for businessmen from Kenya and other African nations to learn about Jordanian industries, which will help to sign future partnerships with the Jordanian private sector. King Abdullah stressed enhanced cooperation and coordination with Kenya on priority issues, top of which is fighting terrorism and terrorist gangs that threaten the Middle East and Horn of Africa countries and the entire world. His Majesty and President Kenyatta attended a joint military drill by the Jordan Armed Forces Arab Army Rapid Reaction Force and Kenyan Special Forces. The exercise is the first military task by the reaction force outside of Jordan, depending on its own military resources, arms and equipment. The Kenyan leader held a luncheon in honor of the King and the accompanying delegation, which comprised the King's military advisor, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mashal Zibin. King Abdullah was accorded full honors as he left Nairo Airport at the end of the visit. The U.S. television network CBS aired an interview with His Majesty King Abdullah, which was conducted by Scott Pelley, presenter of the news program 60 Minutes. Next is the interview. The Media Commission has ordered on the death shooting of Jordanian writer Nahat Hattar. The ban, ordered at the request of the State Security Court's prosecutor, covers reports and publications in broadcast, print and electronic media. The order, which exempts statements by the Prosecutor General, was to protect the confidentiality of the investigation and achieve the public interest. The Kremlin said it is gravely concerned by the situation in Syria. It said rebels were using a ceasefire to regroup and wage offensives against government troops. The United States accused Moscow of barbarism as Russian warplanes supporting the Assad regime pounded Aleppo. Russia also said ending the Syrian war is almost impossible. Meantime, aid convoys reached besieged Syrian towns for the first time in months. This report has more.
The United States called Russia's action in Syria barbarism, not counter-terrorism, while Moscow's UN envoy said ending the war is almost an impossible task now, as Syrian government forces, backed by Moscow, bombed the city of Aleppo. The United Nations Security Council met yesterday at the request of the United States, Britain and France to discuss the escalation of fighting in Aleppo.
What Russia is sponsoring and doing is not counterterrorism, it is barbarism. Instead of pursuing peace, Russia and Assad make war. Instead of helping get life-saving aid to civilians, Russia and Assad are bombing the humanitarian convoys, hospitals, and first responders who are trying desperately to keep people alive.
UN Syria mediator Staffan de Mistura appealed to the Security Council to come up with a way to enforce a cessation of hostilities.
I'm still convinced that we can turn the course of events. We have proven this more than once before, because any sign of me resigning would be a signal that the international community is quitting the Syrians. And the UN will never quit the Syrians, and neither will you.
Syria's Foreign Minister Walid al-Muallim told a Beirut-based television channel the rebels and the United States are responsible for the failure of the ceasefire. The United Nations World Food Programme, meanwhile, said aid convoys reached besieged Syrian towns for the first time in months.
Today marks a very important day. Since 5 months we were not able to come to the 4 towns, and we are in Madaya now. And we finally got this convoy rolling into Madaya, and we are unloading, as you see now. People here complain that winter is coming, they don't have clothes, they don't have firewood, they don't have wood to cook. They're actually burning carpets, they're burning furniture just to cook and also to produce fuel.
In Aleppo, dozens of airstrikes hit rebel-held areas of the northern city overnight. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said it had documented the deaths of 237 people, including 38 children, from airstrikes on Aleppo city and the surrounding countryside since last Monday when the ceasefire ended. Of those documented deaths, 162 were in rebel-held East Aleppo. In the city of Homs, the planned evacuation of several hundred Syrian rebels finished with a second group of fighters and their families leaving the Al-Wa'ir neighborhood by bus. Hala Dababne for the News at 10.
U.S. Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump said if elected, he would recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, making a potential dramatic shift in U.S. policy. Trump's campaign said he made the pledge during a meeting at his tower in New York with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. His campaign said Trump told Netanyahu that under his administration, the United States would recognize Jerusalem as the undivided capital of the State of Israel. The campaign explained that Trump agreed with Netanyahu that peace in the region would only be achieved when the Palestinians renounce what he called hatred and violence and accept Israel as a Jewish state. The campaign added Trump and Netanyahu discussed at a length Israel's separation barrier, cited by Trump in references to his own controversial immigration policies. Democrat Hillary Clinton and Republican Donald Trump will face off for the first time in a U.S. presidential debate. It could rank as one of the most watched and highly anticipated political showdowns in U.S. history. The tight race for the White House and the unpredictable clash in styles between the candidates has generated wide interest in the encounter, which comes 6 weeks before the November 8th election. The size of the television viewing audience is expected to challenge the presidential debate record of 80 million who watched the 1980 encounter between Democratic President Jimmy Carter and Republican Donald Reagan. In a bid for unity, dozens of former appointees of the administration of former U.S. President George W. Bush announced their support for Trump. Security was tight at the Hofstra University, the site of the presidential debate. German Chancellor Angela Merkel said the European Union needed to establish migrant deals with Egypt and Tunisia along the lines of the agreement it already has with Turkey. She also said more must be spent on development aid to deal with the root causes of migration. The EU and Turkey agreed in March that Ankara would stem the flow of illegal migrants to Europe in exchange for financial aid and the promise of visa-free travel. Swiss duo Kurt Friedin and Pascal Wittprach-Tiger won their second successive long-distance balloon championship after a 58-hour journey that saw them travel 1,803 kilometers from Gladbeck in Germany to Stravos in Greece. The race began on September 18th with 2 teams, each from Switzerland, the United States, Germany, France and Belgium, while a single team participated from each of Poland, Netherlands, Lithuania, Spain, Britain, Austria and Australia. The next race will start from Switzerland for the next 2 years.
We're alive, that's all that counts. And it was a
Leicester City will bank on the inside knowledge and goal threat of Porto's Nimeni's Islam Slimani ahead of their Champions League Group G clash tomorrow. Slimani, who joined Leicester from Sporting Lisbon for a club record fee in the transfer window, scored 6 goals against Sporting's arch-rivals Porto during his time in Portugal, earning the nickname the Dragon Slayer. Leicester will be looking to rebound from a 4-1 defeat at the hands of Manchester United at the weekend, which followed a 4-2 home defeat to Chelsea in the EFL Cup. And finally, the weather forecast: fair for the rest of tonight in many regions and also moderate in the Jordan Valley and the Dead Sea. Similar conditions will continue across the country tomorrow, with a high of 27 degrees in Amman and northwesterly winds. The Gulf Aqaba should expect a mild autumn day tomorrow, with northerly moderate to brisk winds and slightly high seas. Next are the lows and highs for tonight and tomorrow. And to close our top stories once again, His Majesty and the Kenyan President discussed cooperation in a host of sectors and agreed to coordinate in the fight against terrorism. The King addresses the fight against terrorism and the impact of the Syrian refugee crisis on Jordan in a CBS interview. And aid convoys reach besieged Syrian towns for the first time in months as warplanes pound Aleppo. And with that, we come to the end of tonight's news. Thank you for joining us.